Welcome to the Red Flags Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. As always, before we dive into the story, I kindly ask you to like this video and make sure you're subscribed to my blog. That way, you help keep me motivated, and your activity also helps other people discover my podcast. If you've ever attempted to calculate the formula for love, allow me to save you the trouble. It exists, and it's simultaneously the best and worst news you'll ever hear. I should know. I accidentally created an algorithm that predicts infidelity with an accuracy that would terrify even the most cynical divorce attorney in Los Angeles. My name is Evan Ramirez, and my business card says Tech Startup Founder, which in Californian dialect means a person whose unbearable combination of optimism and narcissism somehow attracted venture capital. This year I turned 36, marking the occasion with a fleeting existential panic disguised as a rooftop party in Silver Lake. My wife Adriana, a brilliant neurobiologist with a taste for espresso martinis and men who are evidently not me, organized the whole affair. For the record, we've been together 11 years and 4 months. If you're counting from our first real meeting in the UCLA library where I spilled cold brew on her and attempted to dry her neuroanatomy textbook with my scarf, only to make everything exponentially worse, fate, or something more calculating. Our startup, Nexus, began as a dating app promising something deeper than superficial swiping. Don't we all? But somewhere between the 5th funding round and the 8th logo redesign, my co-founders, James, algorithmic genius, Lee, and Zoe, explains technology like poetry, Stern, and I stumbled upon a more interesting idea. What if, instead of predicting who should be together, we could predict who would stay together? And that's when things got really interesting, in the way Pandora must have thought, hey, this box looks intriguing. Right before releasing an entire Greek encyclopedia of disasters, we started gathering data. God, so much data. Social networks, messaging patterns, purchase histories, location records, all perfectly moral and unquestionable, I assure you, as I assured our legal department. We built an algorithm that examined existing relationships, their patterns, dynamics, and predicted the likelihood of various outcomes, including, well, infidelity. I called it Aphrodite, Analytical Protocol for High-Resolution Observation of Devotion, Infidelity, Trust, and Emotional Patterns. A bit pretentious, but investors loved it. James rolled his eyes every time I pronounced it. May 18th became a date that took firm residence in my personal history, alongside my birthday, our wedding day, and that day in 1998 when I saw Roland Emmerich's Godzilla and decided I would never go to the movies again, a promise I understandably broke. It was a Tuesday. That unremarkable day that suddenly transforms into a singularity, mercilessly dividing your life into before and after. I was testing Aphrodite on our beta group of 50 couples who had agreed to provide access to all their data in exchange for premium compatibility analysis. Science, progress, irony. On my giant monitor, probably compensating for something, I was looking at the results, sipping my 3rd Red Bull of the day, when a casual thought occurred. Hey, why not check Adriana and me? That'd be a fun test. It was not a fun idea. It was a galactically bad idea. Let's set off fireworks in the living room, or, sure, a 5th martini won't hurt level of judgment. I input our profiles, all our shared accounts, message histories, location patterns, then hit Analyze. Aphrodite contemplated. I imagined electrons frantically racing through wires, calculating the probability that my wife would stay with me until our bodies became nutrient material for underground fungal networks. 7.3% likelihood of infidelity within the next 3 months. I stared at the number, blinked, rubbed my eyes. I looked at the screen again, hoping for some bug, some error, some alternative mathematical universe where 97.3 meant absolute fidelity with a slight chance she'll get too attached to an Apple Store employee. The algorithm revealed additional information. Subject exhibits classic pre-infidelity behavioral patterns. increased time away from home at unpredictable hours, changed communication habits, decreased frequency of sexual activity with primary partner, increased spending on personal grooming. Subject: being Adriana. My laptop vibrated with a calendar alert. Anniversary: 8 years since wedding. Don't forget flowers, plus make Mariposa reservation. 8 years ago, on June 19th, we exchanged rings at sunset in Malibu, surrounded by friends, family, and one particularly aggressive sea lion who was apparently a fervent opponent of the institution of marriage. In that moment, I felt kinship with that sea lion. The first 2 days after the digital prophecy of my marriage's downfall, DPMMD, sorry, I have an acronym problem, I existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously convincing myself the algorithm was wrong and scrutinizing Adriana's every movement like a paranoid detective on espresso. I checked her phone when she showered. I examined her schedule for meetings that appeared and disappeared. I even noticed a new mole on her neck I'd never seen before and spent a harrowing 15 minutes convinced it was a hickey until I realized it was just a chocolate crumb from her morning croissant. I have issues, serious ones. On the third day, I nearly told her everything. We were having breakfast on the veranda of our Los Feliz home, her with her green smoothie, me with a plate of anxiety garnished with toast. "Evan, are you okay?" "You're acting weird," she asked, piling her dark hair into a messy bun that looked unfairly better on her than it had any right to at 7 a.m. "Fine, great, spectacular," I replied with an intonation and volume that guaranteed nothing good was happening. "Just thinking about work, lots of work thoughts, work thinking." "Okay," she drawled. "Don't forget I'm staying late today. We have a neuroepistemology conference, and then probably drinks with colleagues." Conference, drinks, colleagues. Each word sounded like code. Translation: I'm off to cheat on you, according to your own algorithm's calculations. Possibly for the second time, if we're being precise. See, normally I'm not like this. I've always been pathologically trusting. Adriana could tell me she was leaving for an international brain scientist congress on Mars, and I'd just ask if she needed anything from the store on my way home from work. But now I had a forecast. I had data. Adriana was just a parabolic curve ominously heading toward the inevitable infidelity bottom. I needed to rewrite the algorithm, not Aphrodite's algorithm, but the algorithm of our marriage. For the next 2 weeks, I approached saving our relationship like an engineer facing a particularly complex machine learning problem. I created a spreadsheet. I'm that person. I vertically integrated romance, column A. Factors contributing to potential infidelity. Column B, counter strategies, column C. Success metrics. According to Aphrodite's analysis, our major issues included emotional distancing, decreased shared interests, routine monotony, and the devastating declining sexual compatibility. In some ways, it was like asking a machine, "Hey machine, why might my wife cheat on me?" and receiving a devastatingly accurate list of everything I secretly feared. I set to work with the diligence of a scientist trying to develop a vaccine before the pandemic reaches his home. I started coming home earlier. I initiated casual touches when we watched Netflix. I forced myself to show interest in Adriana's neurobiological research about how the brain perceives betrayal, which in retrospect was ridiculously meta-ironic. Ordered a new bed. Our old one contained the history of years, with confirming evidence in the form of a depression in the middle, resembling the Grand Canyon. The new one was so high-tech it probably sent data to the NSA, but it was comfortable, and that seemed important. I found an old box in the garage containing artifacts from our past, movie tickets from our first date to a film we both hated, a remake of something that didn't need remaking, a postcard I sent her from Seattle when I traveled there for a conference, in our first year, where I wrote a poem so terrible it wraps back around and becomes almost endearing. A little plastic dinosaur she won for me at an arcade on Santa Monica Pier on April 9, 2014, the day we decided to live together. I began casually leaving these items around the house, like some anxious house elf distributing sentimental bait. Meanwhile, I spent nights rewriting Aphrodite's code, improving the model. I knew work was going too well when the algorithm began accurately identifying past patterns I hadn't even input, including very specific deviations in Adriana's location history 8 months ago, and again 3 months ago, that aligned almost perfectly with unexplained late lab sessions. In other words, my algorithm wasn't just predicting my wife's future infidelity. It seemed to have detected 2 separate instances where she had already been unfaithful. I was lying on our new technologically advanced bed in the 3rd week of my prevent my wife from cheating on me for the 3rd time operation, staring at the ceiling, when Adriana crawled under the blanket. It was 11:28 p.m. She smelled different than usual, her typical myrrh and sandalwood softened by something. Citrus. Someone else's cologne? Or just new soap at the lab? You've been weird lately, she whispered in the darkness. There it was, the classic preemptive strike. Accuse me so I'd feel guilty and not notice her deviations. I'd read about this on the relationship subreddit during my 3 a.m. spiral into internet theories. Weird? What do you mean? I tried to make my voice sound carefree, as if I wasn't being torn apart from the inside by a digital certainty of our marriage's impending collapse. You replaced our bed without discussing it. You left a plastic dinosaur in my purse. You started wearing that white linen shirt I bought you 3 years ago that you said makes you look like a smug salsa instructor. Yesterday you asked about my work on interhemispheric correlation and actually listened to the answer. Damn, I was too obvious. I had overcorrected. Classic nerd mistake. I just feel guilty for being so inattentive, I said, resorting to one of the most powerful tools in the relationship arsenal, the half-truth. You deserve more attention. We've been too busy to really be together. She was quiet, her dark silhouette, barely visible in the dim light filtering through our Venetian blinds. Then she turned to me, her face unreadable in the shadows. Do you know what day it is tomorrow? Thursday? I guessed. June 18th, she said softly. The day before our wedding. Anniversary. I know. I answered too quickly. Of course I know. I have plans. Good, she said, and I heard something in her voice. Fatigue? Disappointment? Resolution? Because I've planned something too. Planned something. Like an escape with a neurobiologist named Chad, a divorce announcement, neatly formatted and notarized. Barely slept, my heart racing with caffeine and paranoia. Aphrodite's prediction echoing in my head. 97.3% likelihood of infidelity. 3 suspected episodes of unfaithfulness. One husband revisiting every minute of his 11-year marriage like a detective searching for clues in the dusty archives of an unsolved case. On our 8th wedding anniversary, June 19th, a reminder came through on my phone. Not mine, a reminder Adriana had set, but that had somehow synced to my calendar. Meeting with L. 2:40 p.m. Chateau Marmont. Room confirmed. Chateau Marmont. Los Angeles' infamous hotel for those seeking elegant anonymity under the guise of historic elegance. A room. L.I. threw my program of reprogramming our marriage temporarily out the window. I was enraged. I was furious. I was, as it turns out, inclined to obsessive reconnaissance missions. I followed Adriana to the chateau after she said she was going to a work meeting. I watched her enter, looking confident and beautiful in a fitted black dress she usually wore for special occasions. I could have left. I could have trusted her. I could have gone home and prepared the romantic dinner I had planned and reboot the rest of our lives. But the algorithm. 97.3%. My algorithm, my work, my life, based on data analysis, measurable outcomes, predictable results. I waited 20 minutes, then entered. His name was Lorenzo. Not Chad, not Jason, not any of the stereotypical nemesis I'd imagined. Lorenzo was an Italian jeweler in his 60s with a mane of silver hair and engraver's hands honed by decades of craft. Adriana was sitting with him at the bar, bent over a velvet pouch. She was pulling something from it that caught the light. A ring. My old wedding band, which I had scratched so badly over the years repairing our house, working on prototypes, living our life, that it had become almost unrecognizable. She had commissioned it to be redesigned for our anniversary. She had been planning it for months. "Evan?" Her voice was quiet, embarrassed, as she turned and saw me frozen like a statue a few feet away, with the facial expression of a man who just realized he built a house of conspiracy, cards based on a repurposed dating algorithm. In that moment, no artificial intelligence could calculate anything. No algorithm could predict what I would do next, because I didn't know either. Adriana stood up, leaving the ring on the table. "What are you doing here?" This was supposed to be a surprise. I found I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat was simultaneously the proof and disproof of everything I'd felt for the past 3 weeks. I just took out my phone, opened the Aphrodite app and showed her the screen. 7.3% likelihood of infidelity. Her face went through an entire spectrum of emotions: confusion, shock, realization, anger, then surprisingly, laughter. A short, sharp bark that made Lorenzo jump. "Oh my God, you created an algorithm to check if I was cheating on you, and it said yes, and you believed it?" Tears appeared in the corners of her eyes, though I couldn't tell if they were from laughter or pain. I finally forced my mouth to work. It showed distortions in the data, unexplainable patterns. 8 months ago and 3 months ago. Her gaze suddenly became focused, sharply aware. "You mean when I was planning your surprise birthday party with Zoe? And when I was meeting with Lorenzo to start the ring redesign process? Private meetings, unusual hours, credit transactions at places she didn't typically visit. It all added up to a narrative that my algorithm interpreted as the most probable story given the limited data. Infidelity. But there was another narrative, much less probable. But, as it turns out, true. My wife was planning a surprise. "May I?" Lorenzo delicately cleared his throat, picked up the ring. The white gold had been recast, inset with tiny sapphires and an engraving that wrapped around the band. Every algorithm, every heartbeat, E+A. Adriana moved to me across the room, her steps muffled on the thick carpet. "Of course I was bored, Evan. Of course we'd drifted apart, but I don't solve those kinds of problems by cheating. I solve them by trying to do something special to reconnect us." "Your algorithm is partially right," she continued, stopping at arm's length. "We were in the danger zone, but instead of talking to me, you decided to rewrite our code without even telling me you'd noticed a bug." Lorenzo tactfully disappeared, leaving the ring on the table between us, a small metal monument to my technologically enhanced mistrust. It's amazing what can happen when you actually talk to your spouse instead of trying to analyze them like a particularly unruly dataset. We spent the next 4 hours in the chateau's bar, then continued in the room Adriana had indeed booked, not for a secret rendezvous, but for us, as the beginning of our anniversary weekend. Turns out we had a lot to talk about. Yes, she had been unsatisfied. Yes, there were moments when she wondered about what our life could have been. Yes, she noticed attractive people and sometimes wondered, what if? But no. Despite all that, she had never been unfaithful to me because, as she explained, "Unlike your algorithm, Evan, I understand that relationships aren't just inputs and outputs. They're choices. Every day I choose us, even when it's hard, even when you're completely absorbed in your work, or when I feel invisible, or when we're just existing side by side like 2 satellites in parallel orbits." I had become so accustomed to analyzing everything that I forgot some things require not analysis, but simply attention. It's been a year since that day at the Chateau Marmont. I've completely rewritten the Aphrodite program. It no longer predicts infidelity. It identifies patterns in relationships and suggests ways to connect. The irony is that it's much more marketable now. Investors love it. An app that helps couples stay together sells much better than an app that tells you your partner is probably cheating on you. Adriana and I continue our life, recently celebrating the anniversary of that day in the UCLA library, a cornerstone in our personal mythology. We now have a new algorithm that's much simpler and more effective. Talk to each other. Listen to each other. Choose each other. As for the chances of infidelity, I no longer try to calculate them. Some things aren't measured in percentages, but in everyday actions, tiny choices, countless moments that make up a shared life. Though I do keep Aphrodite's original source code on a backup hard drive, just in case. Because while I'm learning to trust, I'm still, at my core, just a nervous tech guy who thinks he can calculate the world even when life keeps proving me wrong. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Don't forget to subscribe, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.